So Joachim, I couldn't see your new car park there, but I gladly hand over the next session to, let me check, Professor Lefebvre. Bonjour. Your audio is muted. Maybe that's on my side. I do not think so, but can you check your audio, please? I cannot. I don't think it is your. Let me check. John, can you see if the audio is working? Let me see. Okay, anyway, I would propose that Mlynski talks for a moment while we look at what's going on with the audio. Okay, I don't hear anything at the moment, so that's my fault maybe. Hello?
Wilco, I can hear you fine, and I unmuted Philippe Lefebvre about 10 minutes ago, but he's not appearing now on my list.
No, because I think he is not on the, he is unmuted from my side, that's for sure. And yeah. Joachim, can you hear me? Okay, there is something that I've done because nobody's here. That can be right. Oh, sorry. Can you do it again, Joachim?
Hello?
Yes.
I'm looking for a picture of my car park.
yes. Sorry, guys. It was me.
Can you hear me now?
Well,
yes, absolutely.
There's a surprise.
Absolutely. Yes.
Hello.
I'll go home. Okay.
Okay. I sent a short presentation before the video, if we can show it. A short PowerPoint.
We cannot show it. I can show the video. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Doesn't
Philippe.
matter then.
Yeah.
So we will start with the video of Professor Mlynski on a vibrant sound bridge, which is an implantable hearing aid. So now we're switching from cochlear implant and electrical stimulation to acoustic stimulation. So
Robert, what I want to know, Robert, what I want to know, do you want to comment it yourself or do you want to just listen to the video?
If possible, I would like to comment.
Okay, it is possible. Here it goes.
Hi there. Hello, everybody. I present you a case of a 30-year-old woman, which I did the first surgery in 2007 when she had a recurrent cholesteatoma and a rather complex cavity, which was reduced, the cavity revised, and the tympanoplasty type 3 TORP performed. In 2018, she had a persistent conductive hearing loss and an open oval window, so we did a revision surgery. And today we are implanting VSB 503 in the oval window. It will not be a standard procedure, it will be a little bit modified. You see there is a MRI without recurrent cholesteatoma in the haste sequence. And here the postoperative CT scan from 2019, reduced cavity, high jugular bulb with dehiscence, and the cavity is reduced with bone pate from the own patient. So we use a retroauricular approach, going through the old incisions, and we see a nice covered cartilage tympanoplasty. The cavity is small. We have almost only outer ear canal, which is rather large. She had no caloric irritation due to this. First step is skin incision, preparing opposing muscular cutaneous flap and prepare a bed for VSB 503. We are now going to lift the lining of the outer ear canal. What looks here like a suprameatal spine is not a suprameatal spine. We are looking at the ossified and osseointegrated bone pate, and we are now going to lift the tympanic, the meatal skin. with a round angled knife. Suction is in the left hand. The patient has a severe fibrosis, and we are now already at the level of the facial nerve. We can see the plate of the former prosthesis, formerly inserted prosthesis, and remind you the high jugular bulb and the dehiscence. So we will have to take care not to open the sigmoid sinus or the jugular bulb, let's better say, because this will immediately stop our aim for surgery. So this is the facial, where we're lifting the skin or the reconstruction of the tympanic cavity membrane. And there's only very little air in the tubarian recess or in open in front of the opening of the Eustachian tube. For lifting the inferior part, it's advisable to use a round straight knife, not the sickle knife, in order not to puncture the jugular bulb. This bleeding is not from the jugular bulb, it's only the fibrosis. So in the former surgery, there was an open oval window, and what we've done there was to reconstruct the footplate of the stapes with a so-called T-cartilage, which was invented by Jan Helms. We will see later a sketch of this reconstruction, and we are now dissecting sharply with the Bellucci scissors the fibrosis. So this is the region of the cochleariform process where the suction or the knife now is. Facial and horizontal is at the level. There is the opening of the Eustachian tube, and there's some air there. And at the inferior part, this is towards the carotid, there's also some air. So this is the promontory and the round window niche and the high jugular bulb. So there's almost no space for putting an FMT to the round window niche, except of drilling away parts of the cochlea. So now we harvest the previously inserted prosthesis, which is also not a standard prosthesis, it's a bell prosthesis, which is modified for being placed on the cartilage reconstruction of the footplate. This technique leads to about 50% of the patients where we can have success in the reconstruction, and the other 50, as is this patient, do not have successful reconstruction of the conductive component. So this is the sketch. On the left side you see an open oval window. On the right side you see the cartilage. It's horizontal and the vertical part. The vertical part of the cartilage is in the oval niche, and on top rests the modified prosthesis. We have now fixed the warp 503 and have to place the FMT to the oval window. The cable needs to be properly placed in order not to put any tension on the FMT. And as I said, this is not a regular positioning of the FMT because we have a very individual situation in this patient. So we cannot use the standard techniques for the right sound bridge, which would have been presented by Philippe Lefebvre if the presentation would have worked. So it was planned to have an introduction to the standard techniques by Philippe, and before you see such an extraordinary situation. On the left side is a stapes fork, and we now place the FMT on the cartilage reconstruction of the footplate. And it's important, as I said, that the cable does not put any tension and stress to the FMT, because this will dislocate the FMT. Now we have a look at this is the cartilage reconstruction of the foot plate, and the FMT directly rests on it. So how do we check whether this patient or this reconstruction would be sufficient for energy transfer into the cochlea? So we've placed ABR electrodes outside and have connected the warp to an audio processor, which is pre-fitted, and this is the ABR recording. We have a response at 30 dB with a little latency shift toward the right. So regular is about 7 milliseconds, and now it's 9 seconds. So we have an auditory response to it, but with 30 dB at the threshold, we are not that happy. So we will try to improve this. We will place some gel foam on top in order to test whether the pretension or the load of the FMT will help for a better energy transfer into the cochlea. So again, we record, get almost the same picture. So a little latency shift to the right and a nice curve 5. So what we will do now is individualized treatment, which is agreed by the patient in advance that we will have individualized treatment. We will use a bell prosthesis, which will be basically set on top of the FMT. Therefore, we bend the little fingers of the bell cup, and later we can optimize the position and the tension between the FMT, oval window, and the tympanic membrane. So we cut off the FMT sizer and now bend the little fingers so they will sit on top of the FMT. We now close the plate on top and will cut the remnants of the prosthesis. So this little pin helps us to fix the FMT in the cartilage reconstruction of our tympanic membrane. So this hopefully helps in stabilizing the FMT reconstruction. The long part of the plate goes directs towards the, or points toward the Eustachian orifice. We will put some additional cartilage. The harvesting of the cartilage I have not shown. I think this is, everybody's familiar with this. Before next measurement, we will put some gel foam in the tympanomeatal angle in order to rest the tympanic membrane on the prosthesis, because due to the lifting it has lost its distance to the medial part. So some gel foam which is soaked in doxycycline. Now we have a nice answer, same shape but at 20 dB. So this we have almost the same complex, but at least 10 dB at least 10 dB lower threshold than, it's not the threshold input than before. Now we have to make sure that the cable will not in the future penetrate the tympanic canal reconstruction. So we put some cartilage on top of the cable. And please mind the increased speed of the video in order to save time. So all the cable rests here in the canal, so, and is covered by cartilage. Now layer-wise suture again, increased video speed. I'm not that shaky. And dressing of the canal, usually with gelitazone and doxycycline, and we put normally we put elastic foils, which is not necessary because there was no skin incision in the canal. So final measurement now with the threshold. So threshold measurements we will see here. So we have a threshold at around 10 dB, between 5 and 10 dB. This is the Volpe thresholds and the postoperative audiogram, and we see now the increased monosyllable perception of at 65 dB by 90% from before 30% at 65 dB. So thank you very much for your attention for the video, and I'm open for question and the discussion.
This is a very beautiful video that you showed us, and this is quite rather unusual presentation and use of an active middle ear prosthesis. And in order for all the audience, most of these middle ear prostheses are more or less used at the beginning for perception and neurosensory hearing loss, and they have been devoted to, I would say, mixed hearing loss or conductive hearing loss. I have just the first question to the people of the panel. Once you are implanting patients with an almost normal inner ear, do you have any problem like a background noise or a noise of the prosthesis? Does the people complain about that? No, no one.
No, I have the experience of few patients in that case, and with vibrant sound bridge, in my experience, there is no problem with that. For some patients with congenital oral atresia, it was necessary to use mild sound processors or to put a thin shape of aluminum at the undersurface of the sound processor to decrease background noise. But it's quite rare.
Yeah, this happens sometimes, not very frequent, but this may happen. Another question that I would like to raise is that there is the option to have some pre-formed, I would say, tops or pops that can adjust to the vibrant sound bridge. And here you custom your own one. What was the rationale for that?
Yes, thank you for this question. Of course, there's lots of possible prostheses already for the sound bridge. We have the 3 versions for the Incus Vibroplasty Symphonics LP-SP coupler. We have for the round window approach, we have the round window soft coupler, we have the titanium coupler, and we have the oval window coupler, and we have the clip and the bell coupler. These usually are fine if you have an intact footplate, if you have an intact stapes suprastructure or ossicular chain, and if you have access to the round window. So in this case, we had to improvise because neither of the options could be used. One option would have been not to put a prosthesis on top of the FMT, of course, but also the FMT is like a cylinder. In this, due to its small diameter, it acts similar like a ball. So if you put something on top, it is easily being rotated. So the idea, I don't know whether it works for a long time, but it's worked up till now, was to put a prosthesis head on top of the FMT and having the little pin poking out and the cartilage then stabilizing it in the tympanic cavity. So I hope it works.
Yeah, it's a very neat way of placing that. Another question to the panelists would be, if you have the option between a round window coupling or an oval window coupling, what would be your preferred option?
Well, who should answer?
To be clear,
Anyone who has an answer.
Well, to be clear, I think it depends on what you have in terms of the anatomy. I mean, as long as you have the superstructure then you can easily couple and it's more efficient. But if you don't have any access to the oval window, then the round window is preferred. You can use different coupling elements, precision coupler, soft coupler, whatever. That might give you a better option for placement. For the footplate, we saw a very nice technique now presented, but often if you have no superstructure, it's difficult to fix it in place, depending on size. That's one thing. So I think that all goes in whether you go for one or the other. In terms of the physiology, it would be more efficient to go for the footplate instead of the round window, but it's a difference of approximately 6 dB you should encounter.
Anyone has another?
Yeah.
Yep.
I have. First, I want to congratulate Robert for this very nice surgery, and it was really fun to see. And I can assure you, this works. And not surprisingly, we had a similar idea that Dr. Grüninger presented in a poster in one of the conferences. But I think it's logical to use the FMT in the oval window, and available oval window couplers, they are not satisfying in my opinion. So depending on the geometry and the shape of the remaining tympanic cavity, the logical idea is to put a prosthesis on top just to create a flat or higher drum, and also achieve some passive sound conduction to the oval window. And this was the logical for us behind that, and that's why we would go whenever we can for an oval window approach, using a columella on top of the FMT. And it makes sense, but it also shows how creative sound bridge or active middle ear implant surgery can be, and we need to search for individual solutions. And this was a very, very nice example with a number of nice key factors shown in the video. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
yes.
Yes?
So, in the discussion, I think the first issue is the coupling between the stapes footplate or stapes round window. There is another question. In my experience, in patients implanted on the round window, despite very big gain for pure tone thresholds, the sound, the speech recognition improvement is less than on the oval window, that implanted on the oval window. That means for the same gain for pure tone threshold, the improvement for speech is inferior when the patient is implanted on the round window. Do you have such an experience?
Well, I think Robert can comment on this. He has done, and I remember his earlier study on the coupling of different locations of the FMT to vibratory structures in the middle ear. And yeah, maybe he can comment on these results.
So yeah, what we've seen in our group of patients, about 150 patients, that in the end, it doesn't matter where you place it, if you choose the correct placement for the particular patient. Let's say. To overcome certain inefficiencies, it can be overcome by adjusting the audio process. But in general, your observation is correct. Why? Because, patients where we have to couple the FMT at the round window usually have a longer history of recurrent disease. So they are more times operated. They have the weaker sensory thresholds. So patients with intact chain have middle ear disease, of course. This stapes remnants have better inner ear thresholds than the oval window. Then it's during the old times where we didn't use couplers for the round window. Those patients in our group had to be more often revised because of connective tissue between the brain and the FMT has been destroyed. The advantage now with the airway round window soft coupler is that we have to do much less drilling at the promontory, or even no drilling at the promontory, because the soft coupler perfectly fits the round window niche, and you have contact to the membrane, and then you put the FMT. So the disadvantage of round window coupling is basically that the patients usually have worse preconditions for rehabilitation in our group.
Yes, I agree to the worst condition of the patient implanted on the round window. But if we consider the effective gain, that means the gain over bone conduction, in my experience, the effective gain is better when the patient is implanted on the oval window rather than on the round window.
The size of the oval window footplate is larger, so it is more efficient in the transmission of sound vibrations. Nevertheless, the round window is a good second option. And I think especially to those cases with a congenital middle ear atresia and ear canal atresia, the vibrant sound bridge application is not worked out yet that much to provide those with bilateral hearing, because a unilateral congenital ear canal atresia or oral atresia is mostly unilateral. And the application of the vibrant sound bridge needs to be more explored along this proposal of approaching the round window niche to give those patients better hearing.
Okay. Now I would like to move a little bit further the discussion for the audience and leave this very particular case to go to more general cases. And I would say, what do you think about the general indication of active middle ear prosthesis as compared to, I would say, conventional hearing aids? What are your indications? Why would you propose to a patient a vibrant sound bridge, for example, or a carina from Cochlea, for example? What are your indications? Who wants to answer to that question?
And this,
I can start if I can.
Yes?
Well, I think
Yes, Robert?
indications given. I mean, one is just the indication that is on medical reasons. So as we said, there are malformations, there are outer ear canal problems that cannot be solved. I think these are the obvious ones. And of course, one has to always see whether bone conduction devices are sufficient, because they are easier to place. But these are also active implants in a certain sense. And then the others on the audiological indication, which is much more difficult because we don't have clear indication criteria saying that the active middle ear implant is superior to an acoustic hearing aid. This becomes quite difficult in terms of which measure you would like to take. So you only can say if the patient is not satisfied with an acoustic hearing aid, but from the overall indication for that, he should be able to give him enough so to say, information and gain within an active implant, then I think I would consider it also being the candidate.
Robert, is it also your opinion?
Yes, I think the most difficult part is to not undertreat the patient. So basically, if a regular hearing aid cannot be worn and the patient does not need a cochlear implant, something in between. So only that the patient is unhappy with a conventional hearing aid is not an indication for implantable hearing aid, because he could be unhappy because he will not benefit from a conventional hearing aid because of his low inner ear thresholds, inner hair cell loss. Because if the patient has inner hair cell loss, you can amplify as much as possible. He will not understand speech. So the greatest risk of doctors is
niet te verstaan.
Sound bridge if a conventional hearing aid doesn't help, but the patient actually needs a cochlear implant. So this is a point I would like to make.
Is if sometimes they might have some overlapping. I don't remember what was the audiogram of the patients for whom you showed us the surgery, but couldn't you propose to that particular patient a bone bridge? For that particular patient, don't you think that the bone bridge would work? And why choosing a quite, I would say,
show the audiogram again.
Beautiful surgery. If you show the audiogram, I can see that the bone conduction is almost normal, right? On the ear. Okay, so why in this condition not proposing to the patients a bone bridge instead of a vibrant sound bridge placed on the oval window? I mean, it would have been a much easier surgery, right?
Yes, definitely. There's two reasons for that. There's two reasons for that. First, of course, the patient was introduced.
Can you go a little bit closer to the computer, please?
Yeah, is it better now?
Yeah.
Probably was covering the microphone with the paper. So there's
much better now.
The patient was of course explained all the reasons, all the possible solutions what could help her, but there are two reasons why we recommended vibrant sound bridge and not a bone conduction. First is any bone conduction hearing aid will also transmit the sound to the other ear. So even if we cannot perfectly prove it, but the patients have a little loss of spatial hearing because especially if they have normal hearing on the other side, you have contralateral routing of signal. That's the first reason why active middle ear. And second is we have an application reserve. So if this stays for a long time, which lots of these sound bridges do, because it's a very long-lasting implant, the patient gets adult hearing loss. We have some application reserve, so we can just push up the amplifier and we can get the adult hearing loss as well.
Okay, does everyone has the same opinion on that, between the choice between a vibrant sound bridge on a window and a bone bridge? What would be your Thomas, for example? What would be your option?
I think we could have gone for a bone bridge or any other bone conduction device, especially with respect to the measured bone conduction threshold. Now, in terms of the reserve, I think still there is something. If the patient has progressive sensory neural loss, then of course you have to take into consideration the possible reserve which is given by the device. So that's one point one can, of course, discuss and must keep in mind.
Yeah. Everyone agrees on that?
That you have to look for the supported hearing level, which is the outcome of every opportunity you are working for. If you have a transcutaneous device, even if it is active, until now, the supported hearing level will be about 30 to 40 decibel. In fact, that is not yet enough. And it might be that this active, vibrant application brings you a better outcome. And there's the choice. What's the outcome and which the opportunity? And in case of an ear canal atresia, there is no other opportunity than, let's say, a percutaneous or a transcutaneous active device, or even go to the middle ear to have an active implant. And the question is not answered which device brings the best option and the best outcome.
Okay.
So
any other comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the question which device brings the best outcome is something that needs to be discussed with the patient, and which risk or less risky surgery he want to face. What we do beforehand is we let the patient try with a bone conduction system quite an idea of the sound impression, and then the patient's impression comes into the field, and then decision need to be made. And we see patients who clearly want to have the advantage of stimulating the diseased ears, and others who clearly are afraid of a major surgery and then may opt for a bone bridge. And this, well, if the patient decides to have an active implant aside of a hearing aid, this influences the decision making and in the end of the surgery.
Okay. There's also another point I would like to discuss regarding these implantable hearing aids, is that it has been proposed that sometimes they are in between a conventional hearing aid, acoustic hearing aids, and a cochlear implants. And there's a kind of a window in between. They may be helped in terms of speech intelligibility, in particular in noise. Does anyone have some experience with that? And what would be the recommendation, which is the most tricky question, I think?
Well, I think Thomas could ask this and answer this from experience. This would be, as far as I understood the question, exactly the population for the ducts, which is not longer supported for what reasons ever. But well, that gives a view on implant industry, not to support the device which is good for the patient, but bad for the business or whatever.
I think the point is, of course, that we had this DAX device, which was a very powerful and fully digital system that did allow to adjust so to any individual coupling situation. Unfortunately, this has been taken off the market. And as we learned recently, also the Carina is no longer available. So it's also taken from the market. So that we basically only have left the vibrant sound bridge, which is, of course, not in the best for the patient, but that's as it is. And of course, there is a business issue behind it. So actually, if you would have the possibility for such an DAX device again, which basically could be coupled either extracochlear or in the cochlear, then you really can sort out where the fundamental limitations of mechanical stimulation of the inner ear are. We found that it's difficult because most of these patients had severe to profound mixed hearing loss. And if you want to estimate on the cochlear reserve with this kind of additional conductive component, it can become very difficult to get any measure where the threshold of the inner ear should be. So we thought in the end with our data that it is in the range of about 70 decibels across frequencies. So if it's poorer than that, then the electric stimulation is probably better. But it also depends on the dynamic range. So if your uncomfortable loudness level is, let's say, something like 90 dB and your threshold is 70, you only have 20 dB left, then it's very difficult for a mechanical stimulation to project the dynamic range of the signal into the dynamic range of the inner ear. And I think this is where we basically have to deal with what is about the suprathreshold hearing in those patients, and then we could make kind of the decision whether electrical or mechanical or also combination of both is probably the best.
So your suggestion would be in that condition to go more like in your suggestion would be like to go more like a, let's say, a partial insertion and some electrical acoustic stimulation. Is it what you would
possible, yes.
actually thinking?
Yeah, I think
Does
so. It would be, I think if you could serve the still good hearing with mechanical stimulation would be good. Unfortunately, the frequency transfer function of the vibrant sound bridge is not made for low frequency.
That's correct.
Low frequency. So therefore, I think at the end we don't have something which really serves the patient in a proper way. The other one, the carina or the mat behind it, was so, but unfortunately, it was the service has been stopped by Cochlear recently.
That is correct. That is correct.
Philippe, can I just ask why the carina has been service stopped? Is that a financial thing, or was there a problem with the implant?
So far, I really don't know why they stopped it. Basically, the carina was developed by a company called Otolaryngology at the beginning, and this was bought by Cochlear, and so it took them some time to put it again on the market. One of the major problem, and this is probably I would say, a selling issues, is that the device was pretty expensive, and the problem is it was sold at the beginning of something like 15,000 euros for one device, and an extremely good hearing aids would be something like 3,000 euros, something like that. So why should the patient put 12,000 euros more to get a device in which is completely invisible but needs to be recharged every day, and which do not allow you to get some MRI, and so there's, the pros and cons are always difficult. So it was pretty difficult to sell it. Actually, I probably placed something like 45 of them so far. So the experience pretty big, and it was always very hard to sell it to the patient. So as a salesman, it was very difficult to convince the patients. Most of the patients who wanted to have it did it for, most of them, aesthetical issues. I want to be sure that no one knows that I have hearing aids. That was probably the major issue. A few of them were sports people, especially for water sports, because they wanted to keep their hearing while they were swimming or they were jumping or whatever, and that was the other reason. But again, it was very difficult to do it. So I don't know. Probably it was, it's a quite sophisticated system. The problem also is that it was not completely fitted with the top of the line signal treatments, and an expensive hearing aids would be better, for example, in wind cancellation and these type of things. So again, the problem was aesthetic. But I don't know what was behind the company decision. They didn't.
Can I ask a follow-on question about the longevity of the vibrant sound bridge? Is there much problem with long-term failures with these devices? Perhaps you can ask the panel that.
Well, the failure rate is very low. So we have done the first implant in 1997. So it's more than 23 years now and still functioning.
Yeah, I have one in 96 as well. Two in 96. They still function. But for sure, the external part has been changed, and everything everything is in the external part. I mean, the internal part has not changed that much, I think, in terms of. I mean, even for this patient, they can benefit from the new button processor. Okay.
So we have a question coming through the Zoom room about what level of speech discrimination you would choose to allow for middle ear implantation. What's your sort of cutoff for that speech discrimination scores? Maybe
who wants to answer to that question?
I think that
Robert.
There is really two different situations. The first one is for sensory neural hearing loss, and the problem with middle ear implants is that currently they do not perform better than hearing aids for sensory neural hearing loss, for pure tone and for speech recognition. And so for a middle ear implant in sensory neural hearing loss, the target is a minimum of 25 decibel improvement for speech recognition. The second case, it's mixed hearing loss, and then it's very different because middle ear implants provide double gain on the conductive and on the sensory neural part of the hearing loss. I compared the improvement for speech recognition with middle ear implants in mixed hearing loss, and there is, in my experience, a very good indicator. Wilco, you make noise with your microphone.
It's very noisy.
Okay. Yeah. In mixed hearing loss, if you consider the bone conduction thresholds, the average bone conduction thresholds in pure tones, it will predict the speech recognition with the implant after the surgery. That means if bone conduction is at 50 decibel, in my experience, with the middle ear implants, then the speech recognition threshold will be at 50 decibel, for instance. It's the bone conduction is a very good indicator to predict the bone conduction with the implant.
Does everyone agree with that? Robert, you wanted to comment? Yeah?
Yes, I think the key message is we have to look at the speech perception threshold, and not the bone conduction threshold. If German speech tests, if you do not get above 65% of speech perception monosyllables, you should not think of really putting an active middle implant, especially in sensitive areas. Those patients might be better off with electroacoustic stimulation or cochlear implant. And in conductive or mixed hearing loss, they should reach minimum 50% monosyllables with maximum amplification in the standard testing.
Okay. Does anyone want to give a comment? No? Okay. There's another issue which to me is always a problem, is when we are treating some chronic ears and with a lot of inflammation. Normally you should completely wipe out all inflammation before doing any rehabilitation. When it comes to cholesteatoma, it's even more tricky because there's always the recurrence. What would be the opinion of the panelist on implanting after cholesteatoma surgery would you prefer to do an open cavity? Would you do a closed techniques and then place in middle ear implants afterwards, or would you do a closing of the ear and put a middle ear implants, an active middle ear implants afterwards? What is, I would say, in the plan when you do the cholesteatoma surgery? For sure, you always hope to repair the tympanic membrane, the ossicular chain, but when it doesn't go and you're left with a hearing loss, then what would be your option? What is the option of each of you? Who wants to answer?
For cholesteatoma surgery, the problem is the recurrence of the disease or the residual.
Yes.
Now there is a solution for residual disease to diminish that, and that is the bony obliteration tympanoplasty.
Yeah.
And the group of Antwerp has worked out that very nicely from the Augustinus department, but they have still a problem in general, and that is that the hearing level after surgery is not that much better than was previously. But when you keep open the open ear canal, which they do regularly, you have still the opportunity of conventional air conduction hearing aids, which perform by itself well. Even an open ear canal application can be done. And then you have a supported hearing level of, let's say, 20 decibel or even better. So that's sufficient, although it is a pity that there is still a hearing aid needed. So for cholesteatoma surgery, I think the bony tympanoplasty, obliteration tympanoplasty, has the first choice to be performed, and so the natural hearing level is not enough, then an open ear canal application of a conventional hearing aid air conduction will be sufficient.
Does everyone agree on that?
No.
Joachim?
Well, I think
that was sure.
we basically do as a kind of stage procedure. So in case you still have preserved posterior wall, then you basically can do what is doable through the anterior posterior approach, and then you can couple to any side of the ossicular chain or the round oval window. Now, if you have a canal wall down, you always do subtotal petrosectomy, close everything, and then you can place your vibrant sound bridge in a second surgery. So that's what we do, and where we are sure that we can eradicate the disease in most of the cases, as has been proposed by Ugo Fisch. And you still have the option for coupling on any side, because the fat does not impair the function of the vibrant sound bridge.
Mm-hmm. Joachim, you wanted to call first. First Joachim, and then Robert.
Yeah. Well, I think this leads us deeply in the discussion of concepts of cholesteatoma surgery, and I think the hearing rehabilitation and the concepts of cholesteatoma surgery should be looked at separately. Still, the removal of the cholesteatoma and an ear that is easy to administer is the first aim in cholesteatoma surgery. And if we do not succeed in the hearing rehabilitation, we can do this in a second attempt, either with a hearing aid or with a sound bridge or with the bone bridge. So we have the options. Just to give you an idea on clinical routine, roughly 3 to 5% of the ears we operate every year will end up with an active middle ear device. The others have passive prosthesis or hearing aids. So that's the proportion of patient population we are discussing. And still, when we discuss the active middle ear implant, we should have in mind that the residual cholesteatoma may appear even after 5 or 7 years, and for that a bony obliteration of a mastoid where the cholesteatoma has been, well, I would not do that as a preferred choice. And yeah, Thomas Lenarz mentioned the obliteration. That's something I have no experience with. Our school doesn't teach that, so I have only experience with de-obliteration of fat from the mastoid, removing a residual cholesteatoma, but only also a few cases. But our concept in terms of active middle ear implants would be if the ear is infected, the cholesteatoma shows infection, we would stage the procedure and after 18 months check whether hearing is okay or a device is needed. If the cholesteatoma is removed and we have no infection, and usually these ears have a lot of previous surgeries, then we would consider an active implant.
Okay, then Robert, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, since Joachim Muller and I have the same school, there's not much to comment. So we have
Okay.
Hij is niet te verstaan, hè?
always stage surgery.
Robert, we're having real problems hearing your. It's just really, the sound is really not transmitting very well, I'm afraid. I don't know whether you can help get a bit closer to the microphone, but a lot of people have been texting and say they can't hear it.
All right, sorry. So always stage surgery, and eradication of the disease comes first, and then conventional rehabilitation or implantable devices. One aspect of subtotal petrosectomy, which you have to consider, is that we totally lose control of that ear, especially if an implant is in. Because if we do MRI, which is possible, we have as much artifacts that we cannot check for recurrent disease. And even in the subtotal petrosectomy cases, we have recurrent disease.
Okay, I think it's clear. I mean, the problem is to be sure that there will be no recurrence, because you cannot do any imaging on that, and that's even if it's possible. I mean, the shadow due to the magnet would not allow you to see the middle ear properly. That is absolutely correct. Are there any comments or questions from the audience? No.
Well, just one point. I mean, if you go for displacement of the device in a radical cavity and you don't close it properly, then you will have problems that come from the cable or from the device itself. But if you make the full eradication of the mucosa, that's the principle of subtotal petrosectomy, then your recurrence rate of cholesteatoma is very low. No? And but you have a safe placement of your device, and that is, I think, the main issue you have. If you just try to cover it somehow with cartilage, whatever, it's never that safe. So we have seen these protrusions, we have seen pulled out cables from cleaning the radical cavity, etc. So I think that's what we also have to take into consideration when we speak about how to do it in radical cavities. No?
Yes, that's true. Well, yes, absolutely. Yes, Joachim?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a trade-off of implant-associated cable complications or recidives or complications associated to the obliteration, and these cases are not that frequent, and therefore, well, I personally consider carefully what I'm doing, but also to protect the cables. We have learned that cartilage techniques are also quite reliable in this respect and can protect the cable from dislocations and from penetrations. But that's a decision what to do. No disease has no recurrence.
Let's try and broaden it out a little bit and bring some of the audience in, because this is part of the reason for today. I can see we've got Walter Flores here in the audience. Try and unmute him. You put your microphone on, Walter. I can't unmute him. Put your hand up, Walter, if you can hear me. Okay, he went on mute. I don't know whether everybody else has got any questions. Chris, have you got any that are coming through?
John, he's unmuted now. Hello, Walter.
All right. Walter Flores, do you want to introduce yourself and then put the question that you've been holding your hand up for to the panel?
Hello, this is Walter Flores. I am from Peru. I work in a children's hospital, and we would like to begin with middle ear prosthesis. So, could you explain us more about which are the best candidates to do the middle ear implants?
Give me the active middle ear implants. Is that what you want?
Like torps and forks.
So the torps and porps will be covered tomorrow in the aciculoplasty session. We've got a whole session about passive implants tomorrow. But what we have been getting some more questions about were the optimal speech discrimination scores. Now, I know Robert told us that, but the sound was very poor and a lot of people missed it. So I don't know whether it would be possible perhaps for you, Philippe, to summarize the criteria for middle ear implants.
So I try to repeat it. It's important to figure whether the patient will benefit from a hearing aid at all, or if he needs a cochlear implant. So in Germany, our threshold or our cutoff is 65% monosyllables, which should be understood, if possible, after rehabilitation at 65 dB, sound pressure level. So if a patient does not get above 50% or 65% monosyllables at all with any amplification, he will not benefit from a hearing aid or an implantable hearing aid at all. So this is a very rough idea what can be made to give you
that's great.
An idea.
That's very clear, and the sound was really good. So that's perfect. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, then I think this is the same thing in Belgium. We use about the same type of criteria adapted to the French language or the Dutch language, but this is the same. Joachim?
I have a question, and maybe hear the opinion of the panel. We discussed active middle ear implants for chronic ear disease. I know that Thibaud and also Robert had developments for combination of active devices with otosclerosis. I don't know if this is on your list, Mr. Moderator, but I would like to hear the opinion of the panel on that and how to connect and what are the current trends in using active devices for otosclerosis.
Actually, you take my words out of my mouth. It was the next thing on the list.
Sorry.
Because no, I mean this is okay, no problem. Because the video was more like on the chronic ears and these type of things, and now for sure the problem comes with otosclerosis. And so, what do you do with otosclerosis that has finally a mixed hearing loss, or an otosclerosis for which you don't get an optimal results? I think we should divide that in two parts. So let's go first for the otosclerosis who undergone surgery. I would say the bone conduction remains quite okay, but you don't get a satisfactory results even after revision. So what do you do? Would you use an active middle ear implants in these cases, or conventional hearing aids? Who wants to answer to that? Too tricky question.
So in the cost clinic, the first thing is that if the conductive hearing loss is not satisfactory, if the result for conductive hearing loss of the stapedotomy is not good, the first option is to revise the stapedotomy. We do not usually implant middle implants to cure the conductive component of the mixed hearing loss in otosclerosis. The idea is more was at the beginning in severe otosclerosis with bone conduction threshold in ski slope on the high frequencies. There was no good option with conventional hearing aid after stapedotomy for this patient, and we started with the sound bridge for that reason. Currently, if the result for of the stapedotomy is good, then the air conduction hearing aids are often as efficient as the sound bridge in that condition. And so the place of the sound bridge in otosclerosis reduced. It was small, but it is very small now because the hearing aids improved a lot.
Thomas, do you want to comment on that?
You also could you also could go for a bone conduction device in case the patient does not want to have a hearing aid in his outer ear canal. So they are very efficient as long as your bone conduction is better than 25 decibels. And it's easy to place. And have a very high reliable success rate. So that's what one also can tell the patient.
Yes.
Air bone gap is also influencing whether you go for air conduction or bone conduction devices. And it is difficult to, in general, to answer your question, but as in case the air bone gap is, let's say, 35, 40 decibel, then the passive bone conduction devices are more powerful, especially if the sensorial inner ear component is relatively good. And so the size of the air bone gap is influencing your decision too.
Yeah. Yes.
I made a little study 2 years ago to compare the hearing results of stapedotomy plus vibrant sound bridge compared to stapedotomy plus hearing aids. And the first thing is that we usually not test the patient with their hearing aids after stapedotomy. And so I tested prospectively patient for a few months coming who were previously operated on with a stapedotomy and had a hearing aid. And I compared the result with a patient with sound bridge plus hearing aid. And I was quite surprised by the small gain that the patient has with hearing aid. The average gain for pure tones was 12 decibel with hearing aids, and with sound bridge it was 25 decibels. So my conclusion on this little series is that we should more test our patient with hearing aids because often the gain with hearing aids are not so good. We are unhappy with implantable hearing aids where the gains are inferior to 20-25 decibels, but I am sure that a big part of the patient with air conduction have smaller gains than that.
Okay. I would like to ask you, once you decide to place a vibrant sound bridge on after an otosclerosis surgery in which the piston is pretty much in place and you decide to go for a vibrant sound bridge, where do you recommend to fix it? Would you use what is called a short process, that means on the body of the incus, or would you go with the, I would say, the first described techniques on the long process on the incus, and with the vibrator and the floating mass, which is close to the piston? So what would you recommend? Does anyone have some experience on that? Yeah. Joachim?
Well, yes, the use of active devices in otosclerosis are influenced by Thibaud and Robert Mlynski, and we have experience with both in a number of selected cases, the attachment to the long process and as well as the attachment to the short process. And the indication was done when tuning fork test was negative, so we had the option to revise the stapes prosthesis and compensate for the inner ear component by the active device. Nowadays, my primary choice would be the short process coupler developed by Robert, because this gives you the opportunity to also control the ligaments of the ossicular chain in the attic, and maybe detect a slight fixation of head of the malleus and cure that as well before placing the short process coupler.
So for you, the results are pretty much. I mean, the audiological results are pretty much the same no matter where you place your vibrators, right? Is it?
Well, the number of cases are can be counted with one or two hands, so it's difficult to discuss the results because it's more or less a series of single case studies. But the impression also from malformation surgery is that the results are pretty much the same, and if we place it at the short process, we have one more option for the patient, even moving down to the long process. Anyway, even if we use the short process coupler, my preferred choice would be opening of the facial recess to control the stapedectomy and the stapisplasty through the posterior tympanotomy. This is a little bit time consuming, but on one hand, we achieve aeration through the lower aeration way, and the other option is we can control the classic prosthesis through the posterior tympanotomy. But yes, I like the short process coupler.
Sounds as though the Sûreté have finally caught up with you from the siren, but do you want to sort of make a comment on that, or are you happy with the same approach?
Forward. Sorry?
Thibaud? Do you want to add any comments?
Who? Ah.
Thibaud. Dumon. Thibaud.
Oh, Thibaud.
You are the father. You are the father of active devices in otosclerosis for me, so make a comment, please.
Yeah.
So I think nowadays for previously operated on stapedotomy, I implant on the short process of the incus. It's really more simple, less risky, etc. In theory, the closer the FMT is to the inner ear, the better energy transfer is. That means it should be better to put it on the long process beside the stapes piston. But clinically, I don't think it makes any difference. And on the previously performed stapedotomies, then I choose a short process insertion.
Thomas, you want to make a comment?
Yeah. One comment on the search on otosclerosis. So we had the opportunity to do the DAX implantation in patients who had previously undergone stapes surgery and had a hearing aid. And they were not performing very well. But then we gave them a DAX, which means that the piston, the powered piston is directly coupled into the perilymph. And these patients all had remarkable results. That means that once you bring, as Vasu said to Thibaud, the energy very close or at least into the inner ear, then your results become really much better. So this would speak in favor of developing a coupling method for the vibrant sound bridge, where we really couple it into the inner ear. So Burkhard Schwab has developed this as a powered stapes, This works very well. There is some risk for the inner ear, that's the downside of it, but it shows in principle that in those cases we really must say that the transmission of sound into the inner ear is the most important thing. And if we have a direct coupling, then probably we can overcome coupling issues we otherwise have.
I made the comparison of the hearing aid in mixed hearing loss according to the pathologies. And the best hearing gain is in otosclerosis. That confirms that what say Thomas, that if you transmit directly to the inner ear via a stapedotomy, it provides higher gains than the other solution or the other coupling.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone have any other comments on this? No.
Okay, Philippe, we have another question from the audience.
Yes.
We have another question from the audience asking how you choose between a vibrant sound bridge and a bone-anchored hearing aid in managing mixed hearing loss.
Who wants to answer to that question?
I think the criteria are bone conduction thresholds and complexity of surgery. It's mainly that.
Yeah. And the other thing that you can do as well is also you can pre-test a vibrator applied to the mastoid and see if the patient is very happy or not happy, and this is a pretty easy test to do. And the patient can go back to home and then pre-test it. But again, to me, the bone conduction threshold is the most important thing in order to reject eventually a bone conduction hearing aid. Yeah. Is there any other comments on this? No. Are there any comments?
Yes, when you would provide the testing you are saying, and you provide the patient with a more powerful bone-anchored hearing aid, you overbridge the transcutaneous application compared to a percutaneous one. And so that could help him even be better to get a final idea what might be the final outcome.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. I agree. No other questions from the audience or from the people around?
So we have another question from the audience about the impact of middle ear space and aeration on the performance of the vibrant sound bridge.
Okay, who wants to answer to that? Maybe Robert? No?
Yes.
Yeah?
I mean, in otosclerosis, this was actually why we were thinking of a different way for catching the FMT with the super, because we saw that the volume of the FMT in the tympanic cavity, as well as the additional load to the long incusposis together with the prosthesis, is kind of against our having air in the middle ear. So that's why going to the incus body in the first place. However, in the end, it probably doesn't matter. In mixed hearing loss, the air is only relevant for the recurrence of the disease. So there's more air in there to be activity. So whether is the chance of not having recurrent disease. For the sound performance, it's most probably not relevant at all. On the contrary, if you have a full filled fibrotic ear, you might just put the FMT anywhere in the fibrosis and it's being conducted to the round window or oval window. But I don't know. I don't have any proof for this. But there is surgeons I know would fill the tympanic cavity completely with fibrin glue, place the FMT inside and get some good results with it. I would not recommend it because of the recurrence of the chronic disease. It's away.
Okay.
It's a
No other.
petrosectomy cases, the vibrant sound bridge works. So in those cases, it's not an aerated middle ear cleft. So by that, you know it is working.
Yes. Yeah, and there's no real difference between aerated and not aerated ones. Doesn't really change. The transmission of energy to the inner ear is anyway done, and this is what is important. Okay, did we answer to the questions there? Any other questions?
Well, I think one aspect to consider in terms of aeration is the possible extrusion of the FMT and the cables. And I think this should be considered while choosing the placement or reconstruction the tympanic membrane with cartilage in terms of aeration.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Do you have many cases of extrusion of the FMT? In my experience, it's extremely
very
rare.
It's rare. Yeah, I think as long as you stay with what Joachim Muller said, then you probably shouldn't have it. And I think aeration, that is a very positive thing about vibrant sound bridge, so that you don't need an aerated middle ear. It works also in a completely obstructed middle ear or a fibrotic middle ear, as long as it doesn't touch the bone. So that you have a vibration mode which is not damped by contact to a material with high impedance.
Okay. Yes. No more questions? Okay. I think we pretty much did the whole turn. Does anyone wants to raise any other questions or any other topic for the moment? So far,
Philippe, if you perhaps offered a 4 or 5 minute summary of your impression of the opinions of the panel, and that will just about take us up to the next session. Should be fine.
Okay, that's good. So I try to summarize and to memorize exactly what everyone said, and I already apologized before if I misunderstood what you said. I think that first of all, what needs to be done in rehabilitation is a conventional middle ear surgery, rehabilitation of the articular chains with passive implants like POPs, TOPs, or eventually reconstruction, no matter the type you want to do. That's one thing. The middle ear implants is an option that should be discussed and respect to the use of conventional hearing aids. Conventional hearing aids is always also an option that can be tried, but in certain situation it is not as good as a middle ear implants. The middle ear implants can actually be better and gives better speech intelligibility in some patients once it's really well selected. If you discuss about neurosensory hearing loss, in pure neurosensory hearing loss, the middle ear implants, especially now the vibrant sound bridge, which is probably the only one left in on the market, is to be used in medical indications like external auditory canal problems. Can be eczema, it can be closure, it can be stenosis, and can be drainage, and can be recurrent otitis, and that's obviously or eventually allergy, and this is a very good option. In neurosensory hearing loss, it can be also a good option in ski slopes audiograms. However, new hearing aids are probably some interesting option for and can be used as well, so it can be discussed as well. Very new hearing aids and probably expensive ones compared to these implants. Now, when it comes to chronic ears, first of all, you need to get rid of all inflammations. Then you need to decide what type of surgery you want to do. It can be closed techniques, it can be open cavity, or it can be closed cavity, completely closed closure. Then in that respect, you can use some middle implants. Option is to fix it to a remaining ossicular chains, a part of it that is still linked to the cochlea. So the superstructure of the stapes could be a good option as well, and can be used. Then you can, if you don't have it, then good option is to try to place it onto the oval window and the stapes if you can achieve a stable situation. I would say mechanical situation. Otherwise, you can go on the round window to deliver the energy directly to the inner ear. That's in chronic ears. And finally, when it comes to otosclerosis, it can be also a good option. However, conventional hearing aids are also pretty interesting and should be tested eventually. So there's always the discussion with the patients, either if you want to use a middle implants or if you want to use a conventional hearing aids. Here, the high frequency loss are probably a good indication for these otosclerosis. Can be used preferably either on the body of the incus with the short process clipping, or it can be used on the long process clipping. And the short process is an easier procedure and allows to check for any other problems of the fixation of the ossicular chains at the level of the suspension ligaments. I think that I almost summarize what we said. Anyone wants to add something that I forgot?
You probably have, but as always happens in these situations, more questions have now come in. So this is the Elon Musk Tesla carbon footprint world resources question. How often does the battery need changing? It's coming from Jean and Orion in India. And what is the expected life of the processor? And I think we'll probably make that the final question.
Thank you, John.
Who wants to answer to that? I think well, the battery is basically onto the into the external parts. It's just like on conventional hearing aids, and I think that the battery usually lasts about 5 days or so and needs to be changed. There's no rechargeable ones, I think.
Thibaud?
Yeah.
The battery lasts longer with a sound bridge. Usually, in my experience, is quite around 2 weeks for the classical sound bridge. And for the internal part of the implant, the expected lifetime is a minimum of 20 years.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. I think that's been quite a productive session. We've got another one in 15 minutes, and we'll be joining some of our colleagues from the industry again over the next few minutes. So I'll hand you back over, Chris, and I'll hand you back over to Wilco Grol.
And Ian, and John. Thank you very much, Joachim, Robert, Philippe. Thibaud, you need to stay connected, and also Thomas Lenarz stays connected for the last session of the day.
Otoplan is a revolutionary tablet-based otological planning software. Quickly and easily import DICOM files from packs or USB drives. Intuitive controls makes it easy to master Otoplan's advanced features. Otoplan's guided workflow simplifies 3D modeling and surgical planning. Easily create 3D reconstructions of otological structures, including facial nerve, chorda tympani, and more. Otoplan lets you see exactly where you are going before you make the first cut. Otoplan makes it easy to achieve an ideal view of the cochlea and make consistent measurements. Choose the ideal electrode array for each patient for best hearing outcomes. The electrode visualization tool uses patient-specific data to show insertion depth and covered frequency of each electrode contact. Otoplan makes it easy to discuss the ideal electrode choice and surgical considerations with your patients. One-step export feature automatically generates a full case report in PDF or PowerPoint format. Otoplan's post-op analysis feature makes it simple to perform a quality check and verify insertion status from post-operative images.
Oui, Philippe Lefebvre ici. Ah, Michel, c'est toi qui m'appelais. D'accord, excuse-moi. C'est parce que je suis en congrès virtuel. C'est pour ça que j'ai pas pu répondre. Non, mais je veux dire, voilà, je sors ce nom-là parce que Paul est quelqu'un de... Ouais, il connaît bien les arcanes, il connaît... Bah, tu peux mettre les deux, là, puis ils sont mieux aussi. Voilà, mais c'est pas... Mais si tu veux avoir le numéro de téléphone de Paul, moi je l'ai, hein, c'est son portable. Et alors aussi autre chose, une dernière chose, il connaît quand même bien le monde de la cardiologie parce que sa fille est cardiologue. Et une des choses aussi, non, je ne sais pas si ça joue ou pas.
microfoon gedaan.
Los pasos más sencillos que tiene el modelo actual con respecto al anterior es, número uno, que es menos profundo, entra menos dentro de la cavidad craneal, con lo cual hay que fresar menos. Y en segundo lugar, que es algo por lo que llevo luchando desde hace 7 años, que tiene tornillos autorroscantes y autoperforantes. Tornillos que se ponen en segundos, en 10-15 segundos está puesto cada tornillo.
So we did now the first surgery, and the first surgery time was about 15 minutes from the incision to the skin to the closure to the skin. And this reflects, I think, the easiness of the surgery itself and also the safety of the surgery. So you don't have to deal with dura, you don't have to deal with sigmoid sinus. To my knowledge, this implant at the moment is the best implant on the world.
Right after surgery now, the first impressions are great. It's fantastic to see how the company uses the hints and the feedback of the surgeons to improve the implant. And so this is like a symbiotic activity between the developer and the ENT surgeon, and that's fantastic.
Wir werden sicherlich mehrere Patienten damit versorgen können, weil es einfach einfacher ist zu implantieren, weil es mehr Patienten gibt, die in diese Richtung gehen, die für dieses Implantat in Frage kommen, und deswegen sind wir jetzt auch sehr glücklich, auch im Sinne von unseren Patienten, dass wir da einfach ein größeres Angebot haben bzw. eine größere Indikationsbreite.
I just finished the first implantation of the new Bone Bridge 602 and I'm really excited. All the work we put in the new design altogether makes a great benefit and a great step ahead for that implant, and I'm looking really forward to tomorrow, 3 more implantations, and I'm really happy and really excited about it.